I'll multiply, as I said. And then when it comes to adults, I do think it's worth differentiating between, picking up from your question, what do we do with those children who have missed out on a GCSE, and then separately, how do we help adults in general, both more foundationally, but also specifically with financial literacy. I don't know, I think Bodil, Lizzie could take either of those. Which one, either of you do one of those, because I think that gives you the full picture.
Yeah, I'll do the finance.
Yeah, so 16 to 19, the GCSE reset policy, I think is very important for those children that have got, let's say, a 3 and they've just missed out, they're nearly there. Let's give them another chance to get that piece of paper, which can be absolutely life-changing for them. I'm very curious to see what the stepping stone qualification will be for the children who got 1s and 2s. What I will say is that we have been spoken to lots of colleges, lots of learners over the past 6 months, and the functional skills qualification, which I think is often meant to be this alternative, has lots of problems. And I would say that stems from the fact that to make it functional with lots of different contexts and to make it fair to learners who, let's say you're doing welding and you know the world of welding very well, you wouldn't need paragraphs to explain that context, but all the other learners who are also taking this qualification would. It's very, very hard to do that in a way that's not extremely wordy and often quite niche topics that you're trying to do, and the maths kind of gets lost in that, right? It becomes a test of, do you understand this context and do you have the literacy ability, rather than the functional skills maths focus that it's intended to be. There are definite advantages, and there are reasons why people take that qualification. For example, Sarah Waite saying it works well for NEETs who would otherwise not be coming into college. They're not going to wait until June to sit their test. Let's get them to do it in a much more flexible way. But I would say that is the inherent challenge of something that's as broad as functional skills, that you can't say, it needs to be fair, it needs to apply in lots of different contexts. It's really hard to do that well.
Which is the last thing on that is, there is something incredibly foundational about having GCSE maths. I think and when we think about alternative qualifications, the challenge you always have is, will they be valued by employers? Right? Obviously, they can help people in their day-to-day lives if they get these skills, but ultimately, if they're going to translate to better employment outcomes and earnings outcomes, you need to make sure employers understand them and value them. And I would say my reflection when in government, thinking about this, is that it's quite a hard thing to do. And it takes time, and it requires an incredibly concerted effort from government working with businesses to make sure that they do value it. So whatever you do that is not a GCSE, you very quickly need to make sure has some currency, otherwise it won't end up benefiting people in the labour market. But I think supporting these young adults to get this foundational qualification is vital, because it has an enormous impact on their lifetime earnings. And that's why getting this bit right, as Bodil said, and again, you've heard, I think Sarah has given evidence from Get Further, which is a fantastic organisation that focuses on this area. It's a tricky thing to get right, but I think it's worthy of attention. And then that maybe Lizzie can talk to you a little bit about, given that we believe this is really foundational and important, how do you help people in their 20s and 30s and beyond who didn't pick it up the first time around, get that qualification?
And it's a different picture there, because they are coming back. The programs that we've seen so far are people coming back to maths, maybe observing its effect on their employment and their broader life, which is great, because it speaks to that intrinsic motivation, recognition of numbers being important that we mentioned earlier. I think there we'd see a different set of potential opportunities to improve the space. So there are some great examples of up and down the country of programs that provide to those sort of older adults, people whose age doesn't end in teen, but it varies, it's patchy, and so you might live in a postcode where the provision is fantastic, you might do less well. What we see is actually, I think, an opportunity to improve online delivery. So we've spoken to some fantastic online providers who are turning away applicants in their thousands, because the funding rules today mean that you need to be from the area where the physical college is, in order to enrol. We see that as quite a crucial missed opportunity. It also shows up, incidentally, in where the individual actually takes the exam. So studying online but doing an exam in person presents challenges with the distribution of funding locally versus nationally. So we think that's a very interesting prospect that people should consider. And then I think we should be thinking more broadly about how we can encourage more organisations to offer provision digitally where they are currently focused in colleges. I know you mentioned the financial literacy piece. I think it's related, but
well, we should probably get onto that separately. Yeah. But Baroness Bill, to your point on what can government do, this is one area where, and Fran, who's on our team, has done great work on this. Again, we set ourselves a essay question of we want to support adults later in life with gaining this foundational qualification that at least now is the best way for them to get the skills they need and signal to employers that they have them. How do we do that? Actually, an online delivery is the most cost-effective way to do it, but also means you can standardise the teaching and you can reach people at a time that is convenient for them, because adults are busy with their lives and they're not like school kids where you know where they are during the day and they're captive to you. So as we've tried to find a solution, we run up against these policy issues where we've devolved these adult education budgets, and the way that they are being deployed locally in areas is that the funding, to take a step back, everyone's entitled, if they don't have a level 2 qualification, it's something that I changed in government, to get this level 2 qualification at any stage in their life, which is a good positive step. But the local authority likely is going to say you have to do it at a provider that is in our area, it has to be delivered in person. So then we've got this brilliant online provider that could do this nationally, very high quality standardized curriculum. Adults prefer to do these things online because it's flexible, but there are these funding and policy things that stop that from happening. So that's kind of one area that the committee can look at in its recommendations, because we certainly are going to spend more time and more of our financial resources to help adults who want to do this. We're likely to want to find a technology-enabled way to do it, but it will ultimately run up against some of these challenges down the line. And then maybe just to pick up on what Bodil said from a kind of policy change again, is this transition from school to college on the resits and sharing of information. You might want to tell the committee, because again, this is a kind of practical thing that the committee, I think, hopefully can put a bit of pressure on to help these children who don't get the GCSE, who are then off at college.
Yeah, so we heard from 16-year-olds who then went on to college, and let's say they are doing hair and beauty as their main course, but they are required to go to maths lessons, often against their will, because they got a 3 in their GCSEs at 16. What we saw is that if you are retaking English, you are likely to gradually, nudge up and improve a little bit every single time you take it. That's much less likely in maths. And you can kind of understand that, because if you're writing in your coursework every day for your health and social care or whatever course you're doing, you're not using those maths muscles in the same way, apart from in these maths lessons. So there's something, if we believe this piece of paper is really important, about making sure that we really seize the moment on that transition from school to college. A year 11 teacher can tell you backwards and forwards what the gaps are for each individual pupil. They can tell you they're in the bag, they're not in the bag. But that knowledge is lost then when they go to college. It's that the information flow doesn't pass through. Individual learners are entitled to the entirety of their script from the GCSE that they sat. And something as simple as telling students, you can request that and pass it on to your college and say, look, this is where I lost the marks. Then if they do take their GCSE in November that term, that's really not long, right? You've got September, October, November to really go from that 3 to the 4. They've got a much better chance of really bagging that qualification. So there's something about that transition from school to college, which is where many of these students who don't get a pass go, that I think we could improve.
Improving those data flows between those institutions would really help the kids.
We're running rather tight on time,
right.
So much to discuss, but we could be a little bit more succinct. Lord Hannett.
Thank you. I want to ask you about the role of employers specifically. My previous experience, just preamble to the specific question, was around lifelong learning in the workplace, where many large employers and employee representatives supported courses. But of course, these courses were specific interest to the individual. But we've heard from businesses about the role of some employers in providing training and support for their workplace in numeracy. But this is a very mixed picture. And we've also heard about falling investment in training. What do you see as the role of employers, if any, in addressing numeracy skills, and what is their incentive to do that?
Yes, it's an excellent question, and we think there is a role for employers with adults. The way when I talk to them and when I'm visiting businesses, the pitch to them would be that there's a couple of aspects to this. First, your employees are more likely to be able to do their job better and hopefully progress in your organisation if they have these skills. But also, there's a benefit to you from having a more financially literate, confident workforce. And most employers agree that actually, if their employees have got financial issues that they're grappling with, it distracts them from their work. They're ultimately going to be less focused, less engaged, less productive for you at work if there is financial anxiety elsewhere in their life. So given that, I think there's a strong incentive, or should be, for employers to do this. And many do it very well. And I remember visiting those businesses in government, and incredibly inspiring stories of actually people who had been working with companies starting as young children without any 16-year-olds without any qualifications, where the company had supported them over their career to move up. And actually, that's brilliant for everybody. The other reason that we'd like employers to do it, and we're going to try and find ways to do this, and it speaks to what I said earlier, is it's quite hard to reach adults. So it's easy when we think about school children, 16 to 19, and even early years, it's difficult to coordinate, but we broadly know how to get at them. Adults are tricky, and actually, unless you're doing it through their employers, you're relying largely on them either doing an online course, which is certainly easier than physically showing up to their local education college. So actually, if more employers do this, you're more likely to be able to get to adults, because you should always meet people where they are, which is a good bit of advice we got when we were setting up, and lots of people who have been in this for longer than we have said that, and it is good advice. And workplaces in that sense are have a unique opportunity to engage with adults and then support them not in a self-interested way alone, but also more broadly for the individual.
Anybody else?
There's an interesting example in Scandinavia where quite often what you find is an entry-level employee doesn't necessarily require a maths qualification, but to progress, they might never be able to progress to the next stage to be a manager, supervisor, because they don't have one. So what this scheme does is they support the employer to send that employee off to get the qualification. They come back, they're promoted into managerial position, and their entry-level role is then backfilled with someone who's unemployed. So it's win-win.
We're going to push on. Lady Shawcross.
Thank you. I should just declare for the record that I worked for Rishi Sunak in Downing Street and that I am now a trustee of the Richmond Project. You've mentioned your work with DFE on the financial literacy curriculum in schools. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about the priorities in that area for both children and adults.
Perfect. Thank you, Lady Shawcross. Maybe I'll cover one particular aspect of it called the Big Three, and then maybe Lizzie can talk to you about our broader work with the Boston Consulting Group on financial literacy education in general, and then Bodil can pick up about how you deliver this in classrooms. So there's a professor at Stanford, Anna Maria Lusardi, who for over 2 decades has pioneered research into financial literacy education, and specifically come across what she terms the Big Three. And what she has concluded from all her work is that there are 3 straightforward questions that are the best way to gauge people's financial literacy competence and understanding. 3 foundational concepts. One of those questions is around inflation, the other one is around compound interest, and the third is around risk diversification. And they've tested, her and her team have tested those questions rigorously across multiple countries over multiple years. For the first time in a similar way, we conducted that research here in the UK earlier this year. And the findings were in many ways a wake-up call, because 40% of adults could not answer the Big Three, which puts us below lots of peer countries like Germany, the United States, Canada, others. So there is work to do here. So when it comes to the curriculum and the work that we've been doing with DFE, we're keen to make sure that these concepts find their way into the financial literacy curriculum, because they've been proven, based with decades of evidence and research by brilliant academics to be incredibly important to helping us understand. And we're thinking a little bit more broadly beyond that financial literacy curriculum for young people. We are thinking about how we can get a greater awareness of those big three in the adult population as well. But I'll maybe hand over to Lizzie to talk a little bit about the broader work that we're doing with DFE and Boston Consulting Group, and then Bodo will pick up the school delivery bit in the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. We are... one of the reasons I think the big three is so compelling is because it is manageable. So we were struck when we released our financial literacy report by the resonance of three things. I mean, you see that in lots of other different areas. They are memorable and engaging, which I think is important, especially when we think about not only the children in the school, but their parents and their own financial literacy. So the what really matters, and as Rishi said, we've been emphasising that in our discussions. They interplay with all sorts of concepts, from borrowing through to planning for retirement. It's quite holistic, despite being this manageable set of three things. But the how is also really important. So we were lucky enough to do a big piece of research with Boston Consulting Group, as Rishi mentioned, on best practice financial education programs globally. And their recommendations were really revealing. So in terms of the what, yes, I think being rooted in numeracy sounds a given, but it actually isn't. So it's important to say that out loud. Financial literacy should be explicitly connected to numeracy. But the how, so how it's actually put into place, is just as important in terms of getting people engaged. And that looks like a few specific things, most notably regular revisiting of topics in age-appropriate ways. So sequencing so that, for example, you might learn about the very basics of borrowing in Key Stage 1, but you would come back to interest as a percentage later on. But it's that building and repetitive nature that is really important. And then intuitively, I think, situating it in the child's real life context with as many opportunities to be as practical as possible. And so we have, just coming back to the work with the Department for Education, we've shared all of that knowledge with them in our interactions because I think that will be key to success. And Bodo can say a little bit about the testing in schools, which we'll also be doing for the department.
So when you tell teachers that you're going to be adding some extra things for them to teach and they're already busy schedules, it doesn't always go down well. And particularly this one, we actually did some polling and found that teachers' financial literacy was actually worse than the general public. So we've got a lot of work to do before we're entrusting this extra demand on them. So testing how that works in practice is something that we're going to be doing with schools, primary and secondary, over the coming year, and seeing what works and what doesn't.
Just on that, just put on record, our thanks and appreciation to the department, the Secretary of State and the Minister, who are very passionate about getting this right. And, we've really, actually, they're talking to lots of people, but, we feel very good about the engagement that we've had with the department, their willingness to take ideas from organisations like ours, and then where we can help them move things along quickly, test things, to get this right for the country. They've been very open and willing to do that, and I think they deserve credit for that. It's not always easy in government, as Ella and I both know, to get things like that happening so quickly, but they are absolutely committed in doing that, and we're delighted to be able to play a small part in it.
If you're all happy, we will carry on just to get the last couple of questions in, if you're happy to stay a bit longer.
Yes, of course.
Lord Stansgate.
Well, my question was about early years education, so we've covered a lot of this already. I've had to wait all this time to ask what has already been asked and dealt with. So really, I don't want you to reopen all of that. But my colleague here mentioned earlier, intervened, and said, what about grandparents? Well, I'm a new grandparent, so I feel this very, very strongly. And I look very carefully at what could be done. So is there anything you can add as a result of the work you've done on the way in which grandparents have a role? Because people are living longer, there'll be greater opportunities for grandparents to play a part in the way that perhaps 50 or 100 years ago they couldn't or didn't. And also the family dynamics of helping, well, you said yourselves, parents can be unconfident about how to deal with numeracy with their own kids, and having their own parents intervene, can cause perhaps problems. Is there anything you want to add on the grandparent angle, please?
Congratulations, that's very exciting.
That's the most important thing to say.
Yeah, new life phase. But I think there are a few things. So interestingly, our research threw up that the people with much the strongest financial literacy were in general older. So even controlling for education, those above 55 who had left school at 16 were doing better than people in their 30s with a PhD. So
it's worth just saying, at that point, it's incredibly strong. I just make sure everyone got it. Just your point about how valuable grandparents can be.
Yeah.
It's so worth repeating because I genuinely thought it was a mistake.
Yes,
Please do repeat.
It is true. So I'll say it again. The one key sort of area of wisdom is in financial literacy, and our research has shown up that the older age groups, even those who left school at 16, will outperform someone younger with a much more sort of postgraduate degree level educated person. So make what you will of that challenge for us nationally. Clearly, those generations have something very specific to offer there. Beyond that, I would say a few things. One is if you hear negative discussion about numbers, you won't need this, darling, because I didn't. I always hated maths too. You're not on your own. You can, at your own risk, as you say, but gently intervene. I think that the conversational piece is very important. And then we've actually had this question before because we did a piece for Good Housekeeping, which has both mothers and grandmothers and some fathers and grandfathers in amongst its readership. And they were raising this exact question, and we were delighted that they asked for practical tips. So I'll share some with you now. So it might be about observing shapes. Rishi's favourite is the triangle slice of pizza versus the square box, but those sorts of things. If you
rectangle napkin.
A rectangle napkin.
And the circle plate.
We could go on.
Yep.
But I think if you're sort of taking a trip out for a pizza or anything like that, observing shapes is really nice. There are also lovely number games, like making a pattern with your grandchild and asking them to continue it or doing it wrong on purpose and having them correct it. You can measure everyday items around your house, largest to smallest. So it's really about, when you're playing with them anyway, thinking, how can I make this a number-themed game?
Very good.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, I'll remember that next time I take them to the Express.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah.
Lady Hanway.
Thank you. I want to ask you about technology. Before I do, though it's related to this, can I just pursue shapes, spatial issues, and whether and how much that figures in education for adults? Because earlier this week, I was told that if you want to pass your driving test, you are tested now on whether you can use sat-nav. Now, to me, sat-nav does not replace maps. Does this come into your thinking?
The spatial reasoning research is really interesting and quite counterintuitive. It's not just that if you've done lots of spatial reasoning in your early childhood, you can do geometry questions better. You can do arithmetic questions better. And it's something to do with you being able to visualize a number line and what's going on. There's something that happens in your brain if you've got that. With adults, you know, I think I haven't personally seen the evidence that you can intervene and magically transform someone's ability to do maps in their head. I certainly struggle with that, but there's something there, definitely. I think that's all I'll say on that.
Right, thank you. Well, the real question is what the role of numeracy will be, how it will change as technology advances. What are the challenges here? Will numeracy remain important? Will there be a mindset which is, I don't need to be able to do that because the machine will do that?
Big question.
That's
my quick response. I'm obviously a passionate believer that AI in particular is going to transform every aspect of our economy, our society, our lives. And if we get it right, for the better. And we have to prepare young people for that world and to be able to use those tools. But in my mind, absolutely no change to the importance that we should place on them having foundational numeracy. I mean, when I was in government, I thought people should study more numeracy all the way to 18. I absolutely still believe that today. And I think the best way to prepare young people for this world, on top of making sure that they can use these new tools, is for them to have a breadth of understanding and knowledge, because ultimately the human judgment is going to get more and more important, and we have to make sure that we understand there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom, or knowledge and judgment. And these machines are going to be great at having lots of knowledge, but the ability to critique that, to judge the output of it, to know actually what the right question to ask, to sense check, those will remain critical human skills. And if you haven't had the cognitive education, I think all the way up to 18 in numerical concepts, I don't think actually that you will be well placed to thrive in that world if you're overly reliant on the machine without that ability. So that would be my quick answer on that.
Thank you. Well,
Lady Alexander, would you like to take our last question and weave any of your own thoughts in with it?
Oh yes, I will take the last question. This is a particularly exciting one to ask of a former Prime Minister, but we will happily have everybody else comment as well too if they so wish. The question, we've asked this to everyone, as you will be well aware, the challenge is what do we ask of government, because fundamentally that's the report. So we will make recommendations to different stakeholders. But the question is this: if there was one recommendation that you would like to see the committee make to government in its final report, what would that be?
Well, I think we'll all have a go, Alexander, and look, and hopefully as we've been going through, I think we've been trying to give you a sense of some specific micro policy areas that I think are worthy of your attention and time to recommend to the government. We organise our work in three buckets: family, foundations, and financial. And maybe I will speak to the family aspect of it, which many of you have asked about. And it seems to me that a recommendation, certainly our recommendation, is that we've got to focus on the intergenerational and the cultural aspects of this. And part of dealing with the cultural issue around numbers and the lack of confidence and anxiety people have around it is by tackling this intergenerational issue. We were just talking about grandparents, but it's so clear that link between parents and grandparents and little children is absolutely critical. And look, I'm not going to pretend it's an easy thing for government to get at, but it's probably the kind of thing that government is not well set up to think even about in the first place. But on this, we should be thinking about it, is how do we break that intergenerational link? And if we don't, we're going to be here in years to come still talking about the fact that people don't think that they're numbers people, or they're scared about maths. And we really want to break that cycle and have everyone feel confident around numbers, because it's going to unlock greater opportunities for them, better control in their lives, and ultimately transform their life for the better. But that requires us to think about breaking this intergenerational loop. And we talked about lots of different ways you can do that, but I think the macro observation is thinking about that in the first place. So that would be my quick thing. And then, Lizzie, do you want to pick one of the others?
I think thinking about the financial literacy piece, as I say, the genius of the big three is how simple they are. And so I would say focus on that, which it's great that we're having the conversation about school children, but also thinking about adults. It is an incredibly measurable way to track progress. So I would say as far as we can adopt the big three as the yardstick for progress, come back to it. Our research found 4 in 10 people have this poor, very poor financial literacy, i.e. can only answer one or possibly none of those questions. It's very easy to track that and see, hopefully, that number coming down with time.
Thank you.
And in terms of schools and foundations, really making sure we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater with any new qualifications and ideas. There's not much point in having a new qualification if it's not valued in the big wide world. And you can't just make a new qualification and demand it be so. That's not how it works. There are real opportunities, I think, to introduce some checks, like the times table check that has been introduced in Year 4. So I'd encourage the government to think about whether there are points in a school child's journey where we could add some other foundational concepts there.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry we've overrun, but I think you had very important contributions to make, and so we will bear all of those in mind. So thank you very much indeed, and we will Well, we're nearly at the end of our evidence session, so but if you have any further thoughts that you'd like to send through to us, then we'd be very keen to hear from them.
Well, Chair, thank you so much again for inviting us and for the good, thorough conversation we've had. I think there is a lot of alignment in your work and how we see the world, and we'd be delighted to follow up. And likewise, the offer is there. If you have any follow-up questions or thoughts provoked by this that we can add a little bit more information or shed some light on, we'd be delighted, and the team would be delighted to do that. But again, thank you for today, but more importantly, thank you for your attention and focus on this matter. It will really raise the awareness and give it real weight, for which we are all very grateful.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon and welcome to this evidence session of Numeracy for Life. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we will get cracking on the questions. So I'm just going to sort of set the scene with the first one, which is really about the cultural issues that surround numeracy and that we somehow treat it differently to literacy. And I'm interested to know if you are doing anything to help with that, or any suggestions that you think we should be considering.
Kick off. Thank you, Chair. Thanks for having us here today. I'm Sam Sims. I'm the Chief Executive of the charity National Numeracy, and I've had the privilege and pleasure to meet you previously as well. So, thinking about those specific areas around the culture, and then what we are doing to address that. I think to start around culture, maths anxiety, confidence, these things are closely related. When it comes to lack of confidence that informs this around numbers and maths, we know this is widely experienced. This is a critical national issue experienced at some scale. It affects overall, in general, women more than men when it comes to confidence with numbers and maths anxiety. And we know that this holds people back. We also know it's changeable. We know it's very changeable, and I can set out some ways in which we go about changing that. When it comes to culture, though, we know that particularly younger adults, under 34s, for example, will avoid situations, in large numbers, will avoid situations which involve numbers and maths. We have good data on this. We also know that particularly, again, all adults, but younger adults even more so, will, as much as half, will avoid applying for a job, for example, or a qualification, taking a qualification, if they know that numbers or maths is involved or mentioned or part of the process. So this sort of culture around feeling a lack of confidence is really holding many people back. About 32% of adults from our research say they feel anxious when put in situations that they have to use numbers. Culturally, though, not that many adults with low numeracy say they want to improve their numeracy. And that's, I think, very, very interesting. They either don't see necessarily the need to do that or see how it would benefit them. And I think the second of those is absolutely key to how we start changing this culture. There's a separation between what we actually think numeracy or maths is, what it meant to us when we were young at school, and actually what it could mean to us, the value that we might gain from it in our lives. And I think that's critical to changing culture. Less than half of all adults say that they would feel embarrassed to say that they can't do maths, that they were no good with numbers and maths. And that compares to 65% when it comes to reading and writing. So there is this big separation in culture as well around numbers and maths as compared to reading and writing that we need to address. So we know it's a huge issue. We have really important clues about how to address it. The place I would start is this intergenerational nature of both number confidence and numeracy skills that we see come through time and time again. And it's a big way in which National Numeracy works to address low numeracy right across the UK, on the ground, in all 4 nations. So what we do is work to empower communities, whether those are school communities, local communities, employers, working with local partners who are best placed to meet people where they are to start to bring about change. So rather than introducing somewhere else people need to go and work in a different way with different people, we make sure that we actually equip people locally who are already working with people to be able to bring about that change. Crucially, around culture, we need to focus much more on motivations and outcomes. So why should we be numerate? Why should we invest in this? I think we have too much focus on seeing numeracy as the outcome. I would say numeracy is not the outcome when we want to motivate people who might struggle to improve. The outcome needs to be something else. It needs to be how that will help you get into work or get on at work, improve how you manage your money or feel more comfortable with it, or how you support your children. That needs to be much more about, that's the reason we're doing it, not for the sake of being good with numbers. I think that's crucially powerful in how we work with communities. We need to remove the barriers, bite-sized learning, informal approaches to get people started. Most people that struggle are not ready to engage with a significant maths course, for example. They're in no place ready to do that for a wide range of reasons. So we need to give people a way to start, to reach them and to make a start. And as we see in so many other areas, that will then lead to greater and deeper engagement. I'll stop there.
I think we're going to move on because we've only really got about 3 or 4 minutes for each question. So I'm going to turn to Lord Stansgate.
Good morning and well, good afternoon now, and thank you. I wanted to ask about the Multiply programme. We have been given the results of the evaluation. In fact, I had to order an extra ream of paper when I pressed print, and it's full of a great deal of information. But what I wanted to ask is that it doesn't seem as though it demonstrates exact evidence of participants' numeracy skills have been actually improved. And unless you tell me that that's unfair, and I just wondered what your reflections really were and are on the Multiply programme, and anything you'd like to say in the light of it.
Yeah, I can. Do you want me to do that? So first, I would say there is evidence around improvement in confidence, and our research shows that improving number confidence is the strongest predictor of a subsequent improvement in skills. So I think there is an inference there, but that's absolutely crucial. We know that 33%, a third of learners on Multiply went on to pursue a further course. That's a good evidence of progression. We know as well that 81% of learners with parental responsibilities said that the programme had improved their confidence in helping their children with their homework and talking about maths. Now that's a very specific, I think, strong outcome. Multiply provided, I think, in many ways the missing link. Before, if you want to do a maths course, you had, and you know what the evidence shows us is not many people do, and in declining numbers over the last decade, significantly declining numbers over the past decade, for understandable reasons. People don't do that in high numbers. With Multiply, it was all about, look, if you want to help the kids that are in your care, you want to get on at work, you want to build a career, you want to make a start, you want something to add value, and then go on from there. That's what it provided, which wasn't, and now again isn't, actually available in any other way to people. It allowed local communities to reach those hardest to reach people and to get them started. And I think that is an incredibly powerful outcome. And I know this because both in terms of the development of the sort of policy, but also in the delivery of this, national numeracy was heavily involved, and we've seen those results ourselves.
Okay. Well, thank you. In the light of the time, I better.
Yes. Well, maybe one of you would like to come in on that.
I'm not an expert on Multiply, but I would like to just say about 1 or 2 things that are happening out in the wider mathematics space, which is supporting the publicity, if you like, about mathematics and numeracy. So one of the charities of which I'm a trustee is called Maths World UK, and we have a Maths Exploratorium in London, and we have another one in Leeds. And Leeds, we have been funded to have a 2-year City of Maths in Leeds. So there are all sorts of activities going on. For example, ASDA is working with us. One of the challenges is how many litres of milk do you think were sold last week? So these are all about things that are accessible. You don't need to be able to do calculations to do all of these things, but estimation is a really important thing. You have had information from the Maths Futures project, I know, last week from Professor Jane Clark. So Maths Futures talks about general literacy, literacy in mathematics. That's not the same as arithmetic. Arithmetic is the precursor to doing the mathematics that you need for numeracy. The Academy of Mathematical Sciences has looked at the contribution of the mathematical sciences to the budget of the country, and has done a very extensive read on the Deloitte's report. So all of these things are out in the public domain, and are being publicised as much as we can in order to show the importance of mathematics. Mathematics is not numeracy, and numeracy is not mathematics, but obviously they're very closely aligned.
Thank you. Lady Bull.
Thank you. Just to follow up on the question about Multiply and adult education, I think what we've heard as a committee is there are a multitude of initiatives, programs, projects, funding pots. I mean, there's a list as long as your arm. It's quite confusing for people. And the issue of devolved budgets, which I don't know whether you heard the last session, but Mr. Sunak said, having a national strategy in the light of devolved budgets becomes quite challenging. So the question is really about what needs to happen, what changes need to happen, so that we have a sustained, accessible, comprehensive adult education offer, learning from Multiply, but moving forward. What needs to happen? Because we clearly don't have that, but we have a massive problem, as you've clearly set out, with adult numeracy. So what changes need to happen? And I don't know who wants to take that first.
Can we go on that?
Well, thank you. Where I would start is by saying that we don't really have a supply issue, and we have when it comes to provision. So I think we've incorrectly diagnosed the issue as let's put on more courses, let's give more people more things to do successively over decades, because we've identified if we just provided more and we made it free and free to a higher level, more people would do it. The problem is it's not a supply issue when we're talking about adult learners. It's a demand issue primarily. So we have to recognise that. And to come back to Multiply, it was the first initiative that did recognise that in the adult funding space, that said, well, how do we boost demand here? How do we get people started? How do we provide flexibility, allow local authorities, local providers to work with different types of organisation and be nimble, and get people started experiencing something in a different way than they've ever experienced it before? This is absolutely key. Boosting demand by starting with how are we going to get more people engaged, started, experiencing success, having previously typically experienced a great deal of failure, and say, I am a maths person, or I can do this, that I know now that I can improve. And we see that with Multiply, not just the impact on adult numeracy levels or course going on to take further courses, but also learning in other areas. We know that when we support people, adults, to improve their numeracy, not only are they more likely to go on further, but they're more likely, our research shows, to learn in other areas of their life as well, because it's a barrier they've removed. So the key to addressing this, beyond all the things that are currently being done, many of them fantastic, is to focus much more on boosting demand by giving that flexibility locally.
And I really want to bring you in, but just before, so I think what you might be saying is it's a bit unfair to assess Multiply on the basis of something it wasn't set up to do, and what it was set up to do, which was to stimulate demand, meet people where they are. It had some success.
Yeah, I think yes. If we focus on just looking primarily at sort of achievement or attainment, it misses the fact that if people aren't doing it, there is no attainment.
Exactly. Please, I would love to hear from you. Thank you, Martina.
Yeah, I would just like to echo what Lynn and Sam have said, which is that if we are assessing numeracy, that we make confidence at the heart of that. That's something that we tried to do at National Numeracy through a few initiatives. So through our National Numeracy Challenge, we let people take the challenge. They can use a calculator, they can use tools, and it's the only online tool that measures how you feel about maths as well as the numeracy aspect. National Numeracy Day, an awareness day, which gets bigger and bigger every year, incorporates things that people would do anyway. So activities, we did a school assembly last year with some year 3s, year 6s, dance classes, online conversations around maths help to normalize it. And the final thing that I'd say is the role of social media content as well. So I'm a financial educator. I create content on the likes of Instagram and TikTok. And if you go on either of those platforms and just type in the word maths, you'll see many engaging, interesting maths content creators who help to normalize the topic for people every day.
Do we know anything about the age demographic of people who lean towards social media for their education, let's not call it education, further development of numeracy skills? Do we know about the age demographic?
Generally speaking, TikTok tends to skew younger. It's a Gen Z, under the age of 25 is a video first platform. Instagram tends to skew kind of millennial, kind of my age group, and then the likes of Facebook will tend to skew to slightly older audiences.
You can really target.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lord Hannett.
Thank you. I want to ask you about the role of employers, and you have a particular opinion on this. I mean, we know that many employers take staff on who may not have good numeracy skills, and then that raises the question of progression in the workplace, etc. What role do you think employers have in identifying and particularly improving low numeracy in their workforce? And what might be what could the government do to support and encourage this work?
Yeah, there's a huge opportunity with employers. We have tens of millions of payrolled employees in the country, and they'll spend much of their time at work. A few things that we could perhaps look at is perhaps accreditations for numeracy-friendly employers, either ones that provide training or integrate numeracy into the ways that they work. The more numerate members of staff in teams and workforces could perhaps nominate themselves as numeracy champions to support their fellow employees. And we could also invest more into, because as a financial educator, I've gone into workplaces and delivered financial literacy workshops, but why not numeracy workshops as a pillar of employee well-being as well?
Yeah, and what I'd add is just that employers should care about this issue, because it will benefit them to care about it. It can help create a more productive workforce, the evidence shows, a more agile workforce as well, very, very importantly. We know that low numeracy has a significant impact around careers in terms of earnings, progression, for example, job hunting, job performance. So government and employers should really take note. It's important also to say that we do have the National Numeracy Leadership Council, which is a group primarily made up of large employers in the country and businesses that do care about this issue. They have already done things like set up an employee task force to address the gender number confidence gap between women and men in terms of numeracy levels, around confidence in particular, and how that can be addressed in workplaces, for example, and have created with National Numeracy the Numeracy for Equality Employer Pledge. So what I would say is lots of employers are already doing great work in this area, have already recognised that it needs much further attention and are taking action. Some of the biggest employers in the country working with National Numeracy, but there's a lot further we can go as Rotimi set out.
Thank you. Lady Bull.
Apologies.
Well, we'll come back if we have time on
Perfect.
that one.
So we've heard a lot of evidence about maths education. We've heard people quote the improvements in the PISA figures, etc. But as you will well know, those improvements are happening amongst the higher achievers, and we are leaving people behind. We heard from Brian Butterworth that if you could raise the standards of the lowest 11%, there'd be a 0.44% increase in GDP. I don't know whether that's so or not, but I don't have any reason to doubt him. So my question is about the low achievers, the ones who are getting left behind. What do we need to do to help them? And do you have any confidence in the driving license style course that is being developed that could be a way of accruing learning and tracking it on your sort of in a passport style way?
So I would totally agree with previous speakers that the starting point has to be in early years. And it's good to see the government is putting in a lot of money at the moment into early years, which is good. I think things that could be improved in early years, because we know that what happens in early years has a really significant knock-on effect into the future, is to ensure that those people who are early years practitioners are really expert not only in literacy and the start of literacy, but also in numeracy. And it was a little time ago when the need for numeracy, for nursery nurses to have a GCSE maths was removed. So there is a lack of expertise in that very early area. In terms of what happens when students go into Key Stage 1 and into Key Stage 2, I have the privilege of chairing the DFE drafting group, and we've been looking very carefully at the amount of content there is in Key Stage 1, because there's quite a lot to do in just those 2 years. You have to take in quite a lot of very basic and very important mathematical ideas. And so with direction from the CAR and from the DFE, we're trying to space out that content so that Key Stage 1 is much more about using a smaller amount of knowledge, but in a much more sophisticated way, so that they really have a deep understanding. And then that obviously has a knock-on to Key Stage 2, because if in Key Stage 1 you're secure, when you start Key Stage 2, you're starting from a good place, instead of having to try and do retrograde work. 40% of Key Stage 2 children do not achieve the expected standard. 40%, so not far off, half the children leaving primary school do not achieve what the government has said is an expected standard. So one of the things that we're hoping is by spacing out, giving more time for problem solving and reasoning, which is the purpose of doing mathematics anyway, but actually we'll get to the point where we've got a much higher percentage of students reaching that accepted standard. And in terms of the curriculum in Key Stage 3, one of the things we know about financial literacy is that the mathematics underpinning it is mostly about proportional reasoning. So Key Stage 1 children talk about additive reasoning. By the time they get into Key Stage 2, they're talking about multiplicative reasoning. And then by the time they get into Key Stage 3, they're talking about proportional reasoning. And proportional reasoning is all about ratios and percentages, all of those sorts of things, which are the absolute groundings for a lot of financial literacy. And so in the curriculum we are trying. It's a shame that the curriculum is about evolution, not revolution, because we'd have loved to have done some revolutionary things, but we haven't been allowed to do that. We've had to stick within the parameters. But we are trying to make sure that these things are consistent and coherent. And in terms of the work that Rishi Sunak and his colleagues have been doing with citizenship, we've made sure that the mathematics that is needed in citizenship for financial literacy is taught in mathematics first before they meet it in other subjects. Similarly, the mathematics that they need in science or in geography or in computer science, they meet first in mathematics before they then meet it in other subjects. And you might think that that's been so forever, but that is revolutionary.
That's great. Can I just, that's really helpful, thank you. I'm just going to come back to the low achievers,
Yep.
and I think, as Sam knows, I'm patron of the Dyscalculia Network, so I'm very interested in people with maths learning difficulties too. What more needs to be done to support those children who are being left behind, and as you've already said, are not getting the foundations, and so the house on which they're trying to build is not solid?
When I cast my mind back to when I was at school, I loved maths as a primary school pupil. I fell out of love with it during secondary school and then during university, and then now in my job I use maths every day and I love it again. What caused that rift to happen in my secondary school education was streaming. So the dividing of pupils into different sets by achievement. There was a sense between me and my classmates that we were taken less seriously as pupils because we were in the lower set, and then even within the lowest set, the most confident children would sit towards the front of the classroom, and then you'd have the people who felt they weren't maths people towards the back of the classroom. And so I can appreciate that there are probably advantages in terms of maybe for the teachers teaching people of similar attainment levels, and there's probably advantages for the children as well. But I just wonder if by separating people by ability level in maths, which is not something we do with English, for example, we add to the rift that you're asking about, and whether there are opportunities for cross-pollination between the more confident students and the less confident students in mixed ability sets.
Yeah, I think that you put your finger absolutely on the nub of the problem. It is, yeah. Do you have a view on this?
Well, one of the things about Key Stage 3 is that students come up from primary school into Key Stage 3, and we know that they get turned off at the beginning of Key Stage 3 because they haven't been very secure at Key Stage 2. So the year 7 is all a repetition, and we know that students liking for maths does a deep dive. And if they are low socioeconomic kids with a low socioeconomic background, they are unlikely then to ever pick up maths again. Whereas those who've got a background of parental support will probably stick with it. If they stick with it, then they're just as likely to take a GCSE and get a high grade. They're just as likely to do A-level maths. They're just as likely to do a maths degree. But that year 7 is a really pivotal year. And I know David Thomas was here, who's also on the drafting team for the DFE, and Axiom Maths is doing some great work looking at trying to keep low socioeconomic students in the maths world, rather than us losing them.
Thank you. Lord Blackwell.
Thank you. Staying on the topic of maths teaching, how important do you think it is, or how helpful is it, to use real-life context in trying to get children interested in learning? And a number of our witnesses have said how helpful they think this could be, but presumably there are some aspects of numeracy, multiplication tables, for example, which you just have to learn in an abstract sense.
It is not easy to apply mathematics. So mathematics and numeracy are muddled up together in order to be able to solve an everyday problem. So say you're trying to work out how much wallpaper you need for this amazing room. What sort of measurements do you need to take? And what sort of calculations are you going to have to do in order to amalgamate all the different bits of the room? And when you've done that, how do you translate that into the dimensions of ordinary wallpaper? This is a complicated thing to do. So when we're talking about applying maths, you have to be really careful about what applications you do, because if the application is too far away from the mathematics that you're doing, then actually it just puts children off. So you need to choose your applications which are very close to the content that you've been doing. It's a great idea, and everybody says, oh yeah, the thing that we're missing in the maths curriculum is real life calculations. Well, there's a reason for that, and it's because they're really, really difficult. Doesn't mean to say we shouldn't do it, but they have their place, and you need to choose where the place is quite carefully.
And I would just add, just on picking up at the end of Lynn's points there, it is worth it, because if it's done well, it can be that difference between seeing maths as something abstract, maths for the sake of maths, which has tremendous value in itself, but for people that for lots of people it's about how they're going to use it, and allowing people to see the connections between what they're learning and how it's going to benefit them, I think does an awful lot of good, which is why it's worth doing this. At National Numeracy, we'd never use any mathematical notation that's not contextualised. It's the approach we take, particularly focused on people with lower levels of numeracy, because we've seen time and time again through our research that is what helps people break the connections which they've had, which is this is something that I learnt at school, the reward for which was not having to do it again, to something that, hang on a minute, this is something that can help me. I'm using this all the time. The number of, the examples that we have of where we ask people en masse, do you use maths in your daily life? And the vast majority of people will consistently say, no, I don't. And then we will say, well, tell us what job you do. And then we start to go through some examples. And suddenly, yes, I'm using maths, not just every day, probably every hour. So there's this disconnect, and contextualizing numbers and maths really helps make those connections towards value. And value is a big part of the proposition that gets people to engage and invest in something, because it benefits. They can see the benefit to them. So it's hard, but absolutely worth it, I think.
Very good. Thank you. Lord Hampton.
Thank you. We keep on coming back to this again and again. People tell us that they want an alternative qualification that's more functional. I mean, we have it. Why do you think is it a case that it just needs to be advertised more, or does it need to be changed, the functional skill qualification?
I would say functional skills is not functional.
Right.
So yes, I would say it needs to be changed. I think one of the issues about it, and Becky Francis, who chaired the CAR, talks about having a level 1 after GCSE, because if you put it before GCSE, you are automatically assuming that some students are going to do this, and that dividing students out is seen to be not a fair thing to do. I think we should have a numeracy passport, and I think everybody should do it, because you can have students who get a grade 8 at GCSE, and so they're very good at all the stuff that they've practiced, but actually if you ask them to solve some really good problems on a real life problem, they would find that much more difficult. And so I think the issue with having a different qualification is that it has been seen to be of lesser value because it's only for those who can only do that stuff. Whereas if everybody had to do it, like a driving test, I mean, we don't identify people who are already, physically very adept and say, well, you only need to do this in your driving test, you don't need to do this. I think there's a lot of merit in that, and it would be a brilliant stepping stone to GCSE, rather than doing something when you've failed it after 11 years worth of maths.
And there was a lot of nodding coming from Rotimi there. Do you?
Yeah, just picking up on some of the points that have been made. I have had success imparting mathematical principles by making, and I think this has already been said, by making the outcomes rewarding. And so if I speak about mathematical concepts in theory, I tend not to engage people, but if I then apply it to here's how to get a pay rise, then you can introduce percentage change. Here's how to save up money, here's how to budget, particularly with the cost of living challenges going on. I take things that people already want or are already doing, and then I put the maths lesson into that, and I've had a lot of success with that as an educator.
Thank you.
Do you want to move on to post-16?
So, which leads us quite nicely on to post-16, and obviously we've just had Rishi Sunak in, great ambassador for that. I mean, and that seems to be a way to get the building on the more real world stuff. I mean, how do you see that going? Why hasn't it got more traction?
Well, core maths is a fantastic qualification, but we don't have enough maths teachers. So if a school's going to have maths post-16, they're going to put it into A-level and they're going to put it into further maths. One of the things that has been tried is retraining teachers of other subjects to teach core maths with quite a lot of success. But its acceptability by the universities is not universal. And so and that's a key thing, isn't it? What are students going to do post-16 if they know it doesn't have any value for the university that they want to go to? So I think those two things are really the barriers. But they're fantastic qualifications, and the students who do them really enjoy it because it is about applications and a lot of data science as well, which they don't get that much of in GCSE.
I agree. This currency issue, I think, is one of the key drivers, and it's both that there is progress being made, but still a lot more to come in terms of universities recognising core maths in that way, but also employers as well. That's something that I think needs to change if we are to improve the take up of provision of core maths. It's employers seeing that as something and recognising that as something that's valuable.
Later maths qualification at school, if it had been an option.
Would I have done the qualification later on in school or just later on in life?
No, in school. If you the post 16, if it had been. Yeah,
absolutely. When I feel quite sad about what happened with me, because it was almost like, because Lynn's touched upon year 7s, and then if you miss a level, then you're locked behind that for the rest of your time at school. And so by the time I got to year 11, I was really, really strong in the humanities and hadn't done maths for like 5 years, basically, properly. So I'm just very thankful and very lucky that at my first job, I worked for a manager who loved maths. Maths was part of my role as a researcher at a PR company, and then I was able to then use it again every day, but not everyone will get that opportunity.
Right, brilliant, thank you.
Thank you. Lady Henry.
And I must say my own experience is I may use a calculator, but I still want to retain the question in my head, does this look a sensible outcome? I wondered if you'd like to say anything more about that and about how numeracy policy should adapt to reflect the way the world is changing.
We probably all have something to maybe add
please.
on that. Certainly from the perspective of national numeracy, very much in favour of the use of technology, but absolutely, in the example you gave, is a perfect example, which is it should accompany having those fundamental numeracy skills and confidence in place. It should be used in conjunction, so that you know, firstly, that what you are putting in is the right kind of query, and then secondly, to be able to know what you're getting out is likely to be accurate. It sounds about right. Because I think the risk with all kinds of technology when we rely on it entirely is not just that we make those mistakes because we trust it too much, but there is a risk, therefore, that we stop worrying about putting those foundations in place at all. And then I think we have a much, much bigger problem as a society as well. We are, alongside a research organisation, Policy Connect, and KPMG and businesses of the National Numeracy Leadership Council that I mentioned earlier, have undertaken some research on AI, numeracy and social mobility, and this is due to be published in less than 2 weeks, actually. So we'll have a lot more to share around those interdependencies very, very shortly. But what I would say is numeracy is absolutely critical essential to have that, to be able to critically engage with information, particularly when we're using technology. It's not really sufficiently recognised or understood. We know that actually, many people, a significant proportion of people don't necessarily see that yet in the same way as they don't see that they're using numbers in their daily lives. So when it comes to things like checking accuracy, using estimation, consistency, understanding probability, likelihood, these are all things that we absolutely have to have in place in order to get the most from technology and to avoid making mistakes, is, I think, overall I would say.
To bring in social media as well, I think it would be a good idea to seek out, engage with and partner with people who are doing great work with maths content online already, and finance content to a certain degree, because they show up online every day, they have audiences, they're trusted, they're able to make maths interesting, fun, and they have enormous reach. In some cases, millions and millions of people all over the country. And so utilizing technology in that way to reach more people, I think is going to be really important. I heard a few of Mr. Sunak's remarks in the previous session, and I just think AI is changing the world very rapidly, has done in the last 5 years, and will continue to do so. I think we're going to have to teach AI skills in the same way we teach IT skills and numeracy skills going forwards. I think we should empower young people to use AI tools when calculating. I do. I will put calculations into AI tools when I'm doing my work. But as Sam has said, not forget to teach the foundational things, so that, because AI quite happily hallucinates from time to time, so you want to understand that what you're getting back is actually the correct answer.
Or it's quite easy to put in point something instead of, because your finger just strays instead of the bigger number. Yeah.
Great. Well, just to sum up, our last question is for you to offer your one killer solution to our numeracy challenges. So if you want us to put one thing into our report as a recommendation, what would it be?
Each or together?
Well, like a numeracy qualification.
A numeracy qualification that everybody takes, like a driving test. And incidentally, I think there should be a literacy and a digital skills one that go alongside it, a sort of a passport that you do in secondary school.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate the final point I made. The idea of having nationwide either numeracy ambassadors or influencers, I think is quite exciting, because Google actually released some data a few years ago. They found that for people under the age of 25, they were losing significant amounts of traffic on their search engine to the likes of Instagram and TikTok, because young people keyword search on the social media platforms more than they do on the search engines. And so a great way to engage people earlier on in their life is by partnering with the people that they follow online and trust.
Final word to you, Sam.
Yeah, I would say, look, you started the session talking about culture and how do we shift that culture. And we need to change how people see, feel and understand the value of numeracy in their everyday lives. This is going to take a massive effort across every sector of society, needs to be part of this, if we're to change that culture and improve that culture. So it's why we collaborated with Barclays recently in their recent report, looking at some of this culture and attitudes and confidence, and together we've been calling for a year of numeracy. It's currently the year of reading. We're seeing so many organisations really working together to make change happen. We could do that with numeracy as well. So we're both calling for this, but we're going to go beyond this, and we're going to build a coalition of organisations, of willing organisations and people that want to make this happen. And I think that government should and could play an absolutely critical role in making this very successful.
Great. Well, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of this session. I'm most grateful to you all. And if you do have further thoughts, do write in, particularly perhaps that policy paper you're about to publish. But we are starting on our heads of report from now on. So you are very important advocates in this area. So thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting us.
think in these 12 years, if you see pretty much every domain has in some form or the other has been actually changed. Prime Minister Modi is very much a person of these times. India actually threw up a leader like him who was in tune with its aspirations and with its expectations. The spirit of India, you know, the confidence, the sort of can-do spirit, you know, when you have a Gaganyaan. Overall, as you can see, it's a much more, in a way, fired-up country. Pride in our civilization and heritage and tradition, who we are, who we really are. And, you know, that's particularly important at this time because we are going up in the world. National security is not just about protecting the borders or doing internal security. Today, economic security, energy security, fertilizer security, health security, cyber security, I can just make a long list. Okay. Diplomacy is not an impatient business. It's not a knee-jerk response to what happens. There is a certain brand India, and that brand India, at least in the last decade, a great deal has been shaped by brand Modi as well.
Namaskar and welcome to Indian Diplomacy, show on India's national broadcaster Doordarshan about Indian foreign policy, India's international relations and how India is making the world a better place. Viewers, this is a special episode under the series of Bharat Reloaded, a commemoration being done by Doordarshan on completion of 12 years of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's momentous rule. Since 2014, we have seen incredible changes in this country and its role in the world. The promises that were made have been kept, and we are now chasing new dreams and goals and ambitions. So that is the story of Bharat Reloaded. And this particular episode is focused on India's journey in the world, our foreign policy, the major accomplishments of the last 12 years, and where we are headed in a rather turbulent and choppy world. It's a great honor for us at the National Broadcaster to be hosting none other than India's External Affairs Minister Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar for this discussion. Dr. Jaishankar is a very well-known personality, but I will still do the honors a little bit by mentioning the fact that he has seen and steered India's foreign policy for a long time. He was a Foreign Secretary of India, which is the highest position in the Indian Foreign Service system. He was our ambassador to United States and China. And after retirement from the diplomatic service, he has been External Affairs Minister since 2019. So it's a great privilege, sir, as always, to host you on the National Broadcaster.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here, Sriram, with you.
Dr. Jaishankar, when we look back at these 12 years, I mean, the question naturally, starts forming in the mind as to what is the impact of leadership, because the Prime Minister has had this enormous influence on so many matters. But if you look at India as a nation, as a society, as a people, and of course as a state, which you are part of, the real query for the viewers will be, what is the Modi effect on all these big phenomena that we need to look at in retrospect, because it's 12 years?
Well, that's actually a very big question. It's a very big question because I think in these 12 years, if you see pretty much every domain has in some form or the other has been actually changed, in many cases undergone a very major transformation. Now, there are two ways of looking at it. One, I think Prime Minister Modi is very much a person of these times, that India actually threw up a leader like him who was in tune with its aspirations and with its expectations, with the thinking of the people, with the popular sentiment. But there's the other way, which is that he also has shaped it, he has steered it, he has led it. And I obviously am concentrated, focused on the foreign policy aspect of it. But there are other aspects. I mean, if you look, for example, at the digitalization of India, I mean, for most people in the world, I can tell you that is probably what fascinates them the most. How digital today we have become, how much we have embraced this technology, where even many more developed countries have been much more conservative in this regard. The other, in a way, is the spirit of India. You know, the confidence, the sort of can-do spirit. You know, when you go to you have a Gaganyaan. You know, I mean, it can be reflected in achievements of various kinds, but overall, as you can see, it's a much more in a way fired up country. And the third, I would say, is really that pride in our civilization and heritage and tradition, who we are, who we really are. And you know, that's particularly important at this time, because it's a moment when we are going up in the world hierarchy, and it's very important for a country going up that you should have a good sense of yourself, and I think that has really changed in this last decade. So when I therefore in a way respond to your question, to me there are actually achievements and practices and attitudes which have changed. There is a overall energy and enthusiasm and spirit in the country which has changed, and there is our own identity and our sense of self which has changed. I think Prime Minister Modi, more than anybody else, captures it, he leads it. In many ways, he is also shaped by it.
That's a powerful combination. Viewers, Dr. Jaishankar is talking about India has become Bharat. Do read his 2 books in succession, India Way and then Why Bharat Matters. This is especially true with regard to the point about India's identity and how it's necessary for its rise. Sir, coming to foreign policy, 12 years, 10th of June, Prime Minister is going to complete 4,399 consecutive days as elected Prime Minister, overtaking Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who had done 4,398 days. So obviously this is an era, sir. I mean, there's just no two opinions about this. Is a Narendra Modi era. So when you have served under multiple prime ministers in your long career, so there is, most of us who study foreign policy say there was a Nehruvian era and there was an Indira Gandhi era, and now there is a Narendra Modi era. So if you were to take a big picture view to start with, what is different about this era in terms of our approach, our way of looking at the world and the way we have acted in the world?
Well, I think first of all our interests are much bigger and much more spread out than the earlier eras. So when your interests are much deeper, then naturally our engagement, our behavior, our attitude reflects that. I'll give you an example. Let's take what is currently happening in the Gulf. Okay, so you have essentially 4 parties. I'm simplifying it a bit. So there is the US, there is Iran, there is Israel, and there is, for the sake of the argument, putting the Gulf together as a single party, though they are different. Now just look at it from our point of view today as opposed to how we may have approached it hypothetically before. Okay. Today we have very, very deep interest with all these 4 parties, and I will actually start from where we have the deepest interest, which is the Gulf. When you have 10 million of our citizens living there, when it is so close to you, so connected to you, when it is your primary source of energy, when it is one of your key trade partners, then obviously your stakes are tremendous. So when we approach a complex situation like the conflict which happened after 28th of February, this is not a kind of a diplomatic conference to where you come there and you take positions by splitting the difference or say, well, the way to reconcile it is this. You have actually sharp, practical, deep stakes with each of these Gulf countries. At the same time, you also have a relationship with Iran. That Iran was a significant energy partner till their sanctions prevented them from
entering, remaining in the market in an effective way. It is a country where we have a significant intersection of interests, which we have demonstrated elsewhere. So you also want to safeguard that. And then there is the United States. I don't have to tell you, what is the importance of that relationship. And then there is Israel, which has actually been a very strong security partner, technology partner in very critical areas, which has stood by us at very important times. So what happens today is, when people compare today's era, 2026, with the 1950s or 60s, I think they are basically missing the point. In the 50s and 60s, you didn't have this kind of major stakes in each of these accounts. So I have to today, deal with this issue. I, as India, as Bharat, keeping in mind each one of these relationships. Obviously, there is a prioritization because the 4 accounts are not necessarily equal. So what has happened is, now I can give you a very similar analogy for Ukraine. You have Russia, time-tested partner, etc. But we also had a relationship with Ukraine. And then there is Europe, which is heavily invested in Ukraine. And then there is the United States, which at one point was pretty much identical with Europe, but that is no longer so. So when you have these situations where you have multiple parties, or even if there are 2 parties, but you have stakes in both, or stakes in 3 or 4 or whatever it is, how to navigate this, how to get the best for yourself and for the world in this, that's a very different situation. Now there will be countries where the stakes are less. There will be countries, for example, for whom whether Straits of Hormuz is open or not does not matter, or whether somebody charges for it or not is irrelevant. There will be countries who may be agnostic about nuclear proliferation. There would be countries who may not, with these 4 parties, have relationship with all of them. May have, in fact, we are one of the few, by the way, who have good relations with all 4.
All 4 are strategic partners.
So I would say today the difference is that the times have changed, India's interests have changed, so India's approach has changed. Second, India's capabilities have changed. So in many ways the world looks to us for many things. If there is a natural disaster in this whole region, people look to India as a first responder. If there is even a big economic crisis of the kind which happened in Sri Lanka, a neighbor says, look, I am in very deep economic distress, IMF is not responding fast enough, so you are my neighbor, stand by me. So I would say I would say in terms of capability, a very good example was COVID, where large parts of the global south basically told us, saying, look, left to the way things are, we will never get our vaccines, or we will get it so late that it will be disastrous. So please, you are a big vaccine producer, please step forward. So I would say our interests have changed, our capabilities have changed, and in many ways, because going back to your first question about leadership, I think our clarity has changed. That today we look at the world, we have a very clear sense neighbors are our first priority. That is why we have neighborhood first. Then we go beyond the neighborhood into the maritime domain. So we have Sagar, Mahasagar policy. So we have prioritized many of these accounts, Mauritius, Seychelles, Sri Lanka, Maldives, which were not there before. If you look at then beyond the extended neighborhood, the Gulf, ASEAN, Central Asia, and we have at the highest level actually engaged all the major players, trying to get an optimum positioning and making sure that Bharat's interests, and we believe that the good of the world and the good of India are not contradictory. You know, I don't have to be selfish. I know how to reconcile it. So I would say that's the real change of era, which is I'm going in there now with capabilities. I'm going in there with interest. That wasn't the case before.
And clearer sense of core national interest.
Absolutely.
Sir, you already mentioned the disruptions in the due to the Iran war, and you know, last year PM's third term actually has been very challenging on that account because of all the escalating armed conflicts and the disruptions to supply chains, threats to our energy security, especially food, fertilizer, our farmers' interests, all those were at stake. Now, how has Modi government approached these very, very turbulent times, and what has essentially, you already mentioned the sense of national interest, but it will be helpful for our viewers if you talk a little bit about our tactics and strategies in handling these crises, because of course you said we have friendships with all major players and we have delicately done the balancing act, but beyond that, how have we ensured the tankers have come through the choke points? How have we ensured the the fuel at the pump remains at reasonably priced, and how have we done this kind of a Goldilocks approach where we have managed to not antagonize any side? I mean, this I think is more than a tightrope. I think many people see it as a miracle. So how did we do this, sir, and what is the core approach or method we used?
Look, before we get there, I want to make a relevant point, but a slightly different point. You know, if I had told someone 15 years ago that my diplomacy at some point would be focused on ensuring fertilizers, they'd be wondering, what am I talking about? Or if I told them, I'll have to, do everything I can, strain every muscle, put in every effort to look after my pharmaceutical industry. Okay. I think a generation ago, people wouldn't have understood it. And what has changed, before I come to your point, how do you navigate these choppy waters? It's actually what has changed in India.